Hi everyone, I'm Gary and I'm back for another kind of summary of my ongoing Curse of Strahd campaign. So, as ever, these videos aren't, I'm not working from kind of notes or a script. I'm working from my GM notes from the actual session, but in general, I'm just summarizing what happened to my players because, as I said before, so much of what we do as game masters is ephemeral. And I'm quite enjoying actually having a permanent record of what we are doing as a group. So I run 3 groups, and this is the group of mine that are playing Journeyman Expert Master, my game, and they're using it to play Curse of Strahd, which is the 5th time I've run Curse of Strahd. So I know this module pretty well. Now, just a quick recap of the characters. I'll put a little card at the bottom that just summarizes them quickly, but there is Bujma. She is a human ranger. There is Devran, it's a human ranger. She's a god-touched ranger, which is kind of like an Asimar ranger. So she presents as human, but she's kind of touched up by divinity. There is Devran, who is actually just a human wizard. There is Philip, who is a half-orc fighter. And there is Kevin, who is another god-touched. He is a god-touched druid. Now, at the end of last session, they recovered one of the magic seeds that had been stolen from the Wizards of the West Winery. And they had also recovered the Sun Sword. And they'd taken these from Baba Lysica's kind of creeping hut while she wasn't there. And as she returned, they teleported away. So they started this session in a bit of a lull, but I don't mind that. It gives everyone the opportunity to just sort of remind everyone. Sometimes it's extremely pleasant to end on a cliffhanger. And I think that you need to kind of vary your endings. You just need to make sure that the endings, when you are running games, you do consider where to end the session and not just end randomly. Sometimes it's really fun to end on a cliffhanger, but sometimes it's nice to end on a kind of victory, but also something that's going to produce this lull at the beginning. Now, the brilliant thing about Curse of Strahd is that it is a sandbox, but it's limited enough that if you've run it a few times or if you've read it properly, you don't need to say to your players, okay, what do you intend to do next time? Because I'm going to plan that. I'll prepare that, but, heading up in that direction. They don't actually have to commit to anything until they start playing. So they had a bit of a conversation about the start, what they wanted to do. And the first thing they decided to do was that they were going to go and investigate what happened to Kresk, because 2 sessions ago, Strahd attacked them while they're at the Abbey of St. Markovia. They left Irina and Ismark Kolyanovic there. And they were like, okay, we need to figure out what's going on. And they were a little bit nervous because they thought, perhaps they're going to be angry with us for teleporting away. We don't know how they're going to respond. So they decided to go there. Now, as they traveled north towards Kresk, they came across they had a random encounter. And it was a really interesting random encounter. It's worth saying these characters are 16th level, so they are very powerful in the context of, what level they are. But in Journeyman Expert Master, there is a fragility. It's one of the design principles for my game. The fragility remains regardless of what level they are. And that means that actually low-level enemies can still present a threat if they, get the jump on the players, or if there's too many of them, or, for whatever reason. But it's just about making sure that, they can go off and fight dragons, but also what's about to happen is still pretty challenging. So this random encounter had them attacked by a dozen zombies, and they were basically moving through this mouldering, crumbling, forgotten graveyard when these zombies rise out of the ground. So the party quickly, they made the mistake of being like, okay, the fighter used Assess Weakness, which is a talent that lets them work out the level and HP of enemies. Not level 1, we're going to be fine. And the zombies quickly kind of closed in. We're like, this is not so bad. We're going to, it was obvious that they were going to have this in 1 or 2 rounds. They were surrounded, but the thing that they had was that they were a little bit separate. They were a little bit kind of scattered. They'd spread out over the road, and no one stood right next to each other. They definitely kind of let their guard down. And Devran was considering casting Flamestorm, which would have killed them all, but it would have been all his FP. And I said, well, this is, like highly sort of obvious and not discreet at all. So if you cast Flaming Storm or something like Fireball, something that's really bright and very loud and very large, I said, I'm just going to have you roll a d4, and a 1, Strahd or some negative force in the Valley of Barovia is going to notice that you've done this from a distance, right? You're not going to be kind of hidden. So he's like, okay, I'll stick to casting low level spells, or really, I'll stick to casting discreet spells. So he did cast Chain Lightning. He roasted loads of the zombies, and he's casting things like Hellbutler's Flaming Darts and all these different things. It's really good fun. The players were, I said, after kind of round 2 or so, they were hacking their way through these corpses. They had most of the zombies done, but rushing down the hillside towards them were a group of ghouls, and these presented a greater threat than they were expecting. So they assessed weakness and worked out that they were level 2. And they're like, okay, we're going to be fine here. They rushed up to Philip, who was surrounded by corpses, who were basically not hurting him all that much at all, surrounded by zombies. First one bit him. He's paralyzed for 4 rounds, and it was like, oh my god, this is like gone really, really, really panicky. Bushman gets attacked by 2 of them. Kevin, who's transformed into a bear, is also attacked by 2 of them. Devon, who was stood at the back, was able to get off a couple of spells. And it's a little bit fraught, and it was really enjoyable. And ultimately, they were able to shoot them down and fight them off and eventually kill them. But they took more damage than they were expecting, and they had to spend more FP and more resources than they were expecting. But it was a really good example of a group of low-level enemies taking on a really high-level party and kind of going toe-to-toe, and it being a really engaging combat encounter. So they defeated those, and then they headed towards Kresk. And inside Kresk, they got there, and they were welcomed in by the Burgomaster. And the Burgomaster was like surprised that they were alive. They're like, what happened at the Abbey? And I described how when they arrived, they could see the plume of blue-black smoke rising from the Abbey that had been burnt a few days before during the attack by Strahd von Zarovich and all his kind of Strahd zombies. They're like, we managed to teleport away, but we don't know what's happened. And the Burgomaster explained that a couple of grim bits of news for them, really. Firstly, during the attack, Irina had been near this kind of pool, this natural pond that's in a stream that runs through Kresk. And some villagers claimed that she'd walked into the water and, drowned, like died Ophelia's death and drowned herself. Others claimed that she had been embraced by a spirit in the water that looked similar to Strahd, but not quite Strahd. It was like, okay, what's going on here? So they went to this pool, and they searched around for a body. They were pretty sure that there was no bodies in the water. Philip was able to he has like knowledge of like sailing and stuff like that. He was like, can I search the reeds and just like make sure there's no corpse? So yeah, that's fine. There was no body there. And then as they're doing it, Kevin rolled a prayer test to pray to the Morning Lord to see, can you give us some information about what's happened to Irina Kolyanovich? And they were shown a vision of her being embraced by Sergei Strahd's brother. And as this, lightning strikes the sky, like hits the pool, and you hear, she's mine. And looking up, they see kind of like an outline of Strahd's face and the clouds like failing. And they're like, okay, so maybe she is safe, but we're not entirely sure what's going on. They continue, but say, can you give us some like help? They pray to the Morning Lord, who, is a deity of hope and light in a very bleak and gothic setting. And the Morning Lord said that there's 2 more items that would be helpful in your battle against the darkness. One is the thigh bone of Saint Markovia, which is a powerful magical club. And they correctly deduced from cryptic information I gave them that this is somewhere in the undercroft of the Chapel of Barovia. Now, that chapel has a vampire spawn in it, Doru. So they're going to go there at some point, hopefully, and get that. The other thing they learned about was the icon of Ravenloft. This small statuette that they found was in the Chapel of Ravenloft, which will, hopefully, they don't show what the purposes of that, but that will help them. And then they decided as a group, they're like, we've got all this information. There's loads of things that we can do. Why don't we go to the Abbey and see if we can recover the body of the abbot, find out what happened to Van Richten, who they had left fighting Lord Strahd. As they were heading up, just before they headed to the Abbey, they spoke to the Burgomaster again, who told them that they had reports that Ismark has been gibbeted in a hanging cage outside Castle Ravenloft. He was like injured by Strahd and taken away, and that Van Richten, who had been severely wounded in the fighting, has been taken to Castle Ravenloft and now languishes in Strahd's dungeon. It's like really good stuff, really engaging, fun stuff. So they went to the Abbey, and there's all the Belleviews, this family of kind of mongrel men that have been flesh crafted by the abbot. And their kind of like asylum block is still there, but the Abbey itself has burnt down, and they're dancing in the kind of like ruinous remains. It's really kind of bleak. It really reminds me of kind of like Woof-Rip. It's pretty kind of grimdark. And the party, like parties do, they're like, oh, let's dance around in the ruins with them. Let's see what happens. And I was like, oh no, like you are failing to perceive the warning here. So they dance around, and they're inhaling all this kind of like burnt ash and all these fumes from these wrecked flesh crafting kind of apparatus, whatever. And 2 of the characters failed a save, and 2 of them passed him. Bujma failed, and she inhaled the fumes, and this warped her mind, and now she's a miser who refuses to spend any money whatsoever unless she reserves his personality. And Philip, who was also kind of dancing in these ruins, he developed a third mouth that speaks with a kind of soft woman's voice that he can talk about that's on his chest. They're like, this is like really grim and disgusting. Well, let's get out of here. So they went back to the went back down to the village, and they were deciding what to do next because they have loads of stuff that could follow. They're talking about whether we should do the go to the werewolves, maybe we should go straight to Castle Ravenloft, try and get the icon, or save Van Richten and Ismark. Maybe we should go get the Thigh-bone. And they ultimately decided, they were like, okay, we know that one of the items is in the mountains somewhere. And they were looking at the map of Barovia, which I always give them, and they're like, there's only one road into the mountains here, and it's to Mount Galkis, whatever it's called, the mountain in the south. Why do we go up this road and have to look at what's there? Because it's probably going to be relevant to what we're looking for. They're like, okay, well, just before we do that, we'll go to the general store. And I don't know about you, but whenever players have the opportunity to go shopping, it's like they're like little kids flipping through an Argos catalogue. They're like, "Ooh, what about this? Ooh, what about this? High time to do shopping. We've got some money. Let's spend it all." But what was really funny is that so they bought some potions of healing and potions of respite and all these kind of useful things, and they wanted to buy some quicksilver because Bujma had worked out that she has a pistol. She's like, "Can I dip my my lead bullets in quicksilver and then shoot them at Strahd or like other kind of undead creatures?" Like, yeah, that would work. And that would be better than just shooting like lead bullets at them. So she wanted to buy some, but the problem is that she kept failing in save versus personality. So it was really funny. Like, everyone was laughing because the player really wanted to buy these bullets, and she was just like failing this save. And because she's a miserly now, she's like, nope, I'm refusing to do it. And all the other players are like, you've got the money, and we're not helping you out here. So what happened was she suggested, can I choose one of the player characters, and I'm a master in persuasion. Can I attempt to persuade them? So I made it an opposed test between this player's personality and her persuasion to roll to try and persuade. It was actually Kevin, try and persuade Kevin to buy some of this quicksilver for her. She rolled the opposed test, but it was a critical. So he bought this for her, but it was really kind of like quite silly. They bought this and they set off, and they headed south towards the down into the mountains, and they came across the Solenka Pass, which is this fortified bridge across this river, and they overcame a couple of kind of magical problems there. They worked out that the stone statues on them were petrified demons if they kind of like tried to circumvent this fortress anyway. So they made their way through that, and that wasn't too difficult. And it was really nice because a couple of the rumors, there's a rock that circles the area, and there's a giant mountain goat that also circles the lives in the area. That all this stuff, Devon, if you roll, you've got the Tome of Strahd, which is a history of Strahd in the area. If you roll history, I'll tell you what these things are. And I was able to convey those rumors to them in a really, really kind of like naturalistic way. And then they came to one of my favorite parts of this module, which is the Amber Temple. It's really strange in terms of the setup. It's almost, I always think when I run it, it's kind of Tibetan, and it doesn't kind of thematically fit with the rest of the module, but it is a really good dungeon, and it's a really enjoyable kind of series of encounters. So they got inside, and I was like, okay, I'm going to run this very clearly with kind of classic dungeon crawling procedures. We're going to go turn by turn, so a turn is 10 minutes. We're going to work out how often there's going to be random encounter tests. And also, because it's so cold up here, all your characters, every hour that you're in the temple and up in the mountains, you're going to have to save versus endurance or take cold damage that ignores your armor. And they're like, okay, that's fine. Philip has a cloak given to him by his god, Valnir, who is the god of dwarfs, crafts, wolves, forests, and mountains, and winter, which makes him immune to the cold. So he's like, I don't need to do that. So that's okay, that's totally cool. So they start to explore the Amber Temple. They went through a series of kind of like side rooms, empty kind of like barricade rooms, and eventually found themselves facing down a barbarian camp that also kind of sat inside the Amber Temple to hide from the blizzard outside because the weather is so bad. The thing was, these barbarians had barricaded themselves in a side room, and what happened was, without checking or anything, the party just decided to batter the door down. So I was like, okay, well, you batter the door down. There's all these barbarians that are like making camp on the other side of this doorway. But they're going to roll a reaction test to see how they respond to your action here. But it's going to be -2 because you've smashed the door down. You've not given them any warning. This sounds really bad. So they rolled low. I think they got like a 5, -2, 3. So yeah, they were hostile. They grabbed their weapons, and we ended up in a really, really, really big fight. And it was really interesting how the characters climbing over this kind of like wreckage of a door that had already been barricaded at the other side. And there was cover saves and armor saves and lots of spells going off. Bujma was able to kind of headshot the enemy barbarian leader. It's really good fun. And they did that. And they were like, okay, we'll kind of drag the bodies into one corner and we'll sleep here because we need to rest. Not sleep here, sorry. We'll rest for an hour here. So they sat next to the fire, so they didn't take the cold damage, and they rested for an hour to get their fatigue points back, their FP back, because FP is used by everything in Gem to. It's like used for spellcasting and making sure you hit, and it's used for everything. It's the universal resource. And then they went downstairs where there's this huge stone statue, and having a look at a couple of the rooms, they quickly located this treasure vault, and Devon was able to cast Dispel Magic on it, and then Philip was able to force the door, like smash the door open. And inside there's all these glittering treasures. Now, this is actually the location of the item that they were looking for, but I hadn't told them yet. And they went in, and there's a golem made of like amber in here. And what this golem did was it's invisible. It's like bewitched to be invisible. They went in, it just like smashed Bushman in the back of the head, sent her sprawling, like the skull cracked. It was really, really bad. And it ended up in a really fraught fight. Now, the funniest thing about this fight was they were throwing everything at this golem. Devon managed to dispel magic on it to make it visible again so everyone couldn't hit it. But it's a golem. It's really powerful. It's like breathing poisonous fumes on them. And it's really just kind of quite fraught. And Kevin, who was who had kind of beast formed into a bear, he's punched so hard that it knocks him back into his normal form. And he stands up, this character, and he casts lightning bolt at it. And it's like, yeah, we'll cast lightning bolt. I was like, okay, just check the description. I'm going to cast it. So they cast it, not realizing that this lightning bolt is going to travel 100 feet before it stops no matter what. And what happened was it bounced between all the characters, and it did no damage to the golem whatsoever before bouncing off outside of the room and kind of like charging out. But it hurt all the characters apart from Bushma and two of them several times before it kind of bounced out the room. It didn't hurt the golem at all. Now, what happened was Philip stepped up with his great sword, his magical great sword, and was able to slash several times at this amber golem, and he's got a red score. He's throwing all his FP behind it to just like hack this thing down. They eventually kill it, and they search the items, and they find the holy symbol of Ravenkind. And while some of the characters are kind of gathering up all this treasure and looking through everything, Devon is experimenting with this holy symbol, trying to get it to work, and he gets it to kind of blast this like cone of like ultraviolet sunlight, and like, okay, we know how we're going to use this against Strahd now, kind of after this experimentation. And they had this ruined golem, and since their last campaign, which is the night below, they've had these things called soul coins, which come up occasionally in my games, and they're basically, you can break one open, you can bite one, it's a coin given by a demon, and it will summon the soul of someone who has kind of like died, and they will serve you. They'll do what you want. But the thing is that you roll a d6 to see what the level of the creature is that it kind of summons. And if you roll a 6, it explodes, you get to roll more 6s. So you're like, oh, we got one of these soul coins. Like, why that golem there? If we got, instead of biting it, if we put it in the golem's mouth, could we like summon the soul of something? And instead of it being embodied, could it be like in the golem? It's like, oh, yeah, okay, this is cool. Let's do this. They did it. Devon, coin in the mouth, like straight to the golem. He rolled a 1. And so I was like, oh, God, right, let's go. So they summoned from the afterlife a level 1 peasant called Gunter, who's a bit kind of stupid, like a bit like the creature from the Goonies, like really, really, really funny. He's like, oh, hey guys, this like enormous kind of like amber golem that's like terrifying. And then he talks about how like when he was alive he died of flu, and he talks in the third person. And obviously, what I find when you run games, and anyone who's run lots of games will know this, is that if you put any effort into an NPC, if you're like, oh, this NPC is going to be cool, they're all like, nah, not dealing with you. You're boring. Like, the game master has invested too much in you, so we are going to invest nothing in you. And because Gunter, I just had to kind of pull him out of my behind at a second's notice. It was like, hooray, we love Gunter. Now, one of the treasures in this room, it's actually listed in the book, is a chariot. So they're like, can we put all the treasure on the chariot and get Gunter to drag the chariot up the stairs like a reverse wheelbarrow? And it's like, yeah, this is pretty funny. And they get Gunter, because he's like a stupid like kind of like moon-carved peasant golem, like giant like 9-foot like machine. He's just like dragging it up the stairs, and all the coins are falling off the back. And I'm like, no! And like it's really, 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 really funny. They get Gunter to the top of the stairs, and they go back to that room where the characters had rested before. And they're like, we need to like long rest here. We need to make an extended rest. We need, we've spent a lot of FP, a lot of our hit points, and that is where we ended. But I mean, how fun is this? They're all like, hooray, Gunter! Like, he's our new favorite character. And I'm like, oh, God, like, this is a module with some really interesting NPCs. And like, yeah, of course, right? It is always the way. Of course, they love Gunter. But that's where we are. I'm really looking forward to the next session, but it's not going to be for a few weeks. I hope you've enjoyed listening. If you have, like and subscribe. Drop a comment below. I'm always interested in what people have got to think. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this and listen to this. I'm Gary. I'll speak with you again soon. Thank you.